Roommate stalked her crush's fiancée, stole her belongings, and blamed me for ruining her chances after I uncovered everything. Me, Solbury, 29, my roommate Cassie, 26, the girl she's stalking, Maëlle, 28, and Simon, 31, Maëlle's fiancé. We live in a city of almost 2 million, but somehow, everyone in this nerd circle knows, or at least knows of, everyone else. I'm sorry if the details are sparse, but I feel like I might be outed by too many specifics, as a lot of us also browse Reddit. I moved to this city for college and ended up staying, as a lot of people often do. I was living alone until I met Cassie through a mutual friend about 3 years ago. I come from a very stable home life. I have a very close relationship with my mother and stepfather, and I have twin younger brothers that I talk to daily. Cassie, on the other hand, was raised by her aunt and uncle and was on and off medicine, I don't know what for a lot of her middle school years. She has no siblings and avoids calls from her aunt, only talking to her maybe once a week. She has her quirks, but I thought she was a well-adjusted member of society. Cassie and I were at a convention roughly a year ago when we met Simon and Maëlle. They had just moved to the area and Simon, Cassie and I hit it off. We found out that we all had quite a few mutual friends and our friendship was solidified when we all saw each other at a party a week later. Maëlle was really quiet and reserved the first couple times we all hung out, but eventually we were all getting on really well. Simon and Maëlle are somewhat of a power couple, if that's the correct word. They are both attractive, they have good careers, but they also have a very visible and active presence in these subculture communities and a myriad of hobbies both within and outside of the community. They have a lot of friends surrounding them, and their condo is often the center of operations for weekends out or parties. Maëlle is very no-nonsense take charge kind, and Simon is very goofy, open, and welcoming. They're both very social, basically. After we met them, Simon and Maëlle got engaged. It was a long time coming apparently, and everyone was thrilled. While I knew that Cassie had a crush on Simon, not surprising, he's very good looking and charismatic, I thought that it was something very innocent, as she's had crushes on people in our friends' circle before. But sometime after they were engaged, I can't remember specifics, I wasn't writing anything down at this point, she said she was going to flake on plans to hang out at their house and play board games. When I asked why, she said Maëlle and Simon had been fighting a lot recently, and it made her uncomfortable. I was genuinely surprised, as I wasn't aware of her being over there without me, and every time we were there everything had seemed normal. Cassie insisted that they'd been fighting, giving each other the silent treatment, and kind of joked that I was normally so observant but hadn't noticed this. She then said she wasn't surprised, that Maëlle was a cold-hearted person and Simon honestly deserved better. This seemed like a pretty intense escalation to me, as she'd never had a problem with them before and got along with both Simon and Maëlle, so I suggested that she skip hanging out and take some time to draw things out. She apparently did this a lot in therapy, and making these flowchart things seems to help her with graduate school anxiety, worries, and difficult decisions. She instead asked if I was still going, and when I said yes, immediately said she'd go. I didn't want to discourage her, but I said that if she felt uncomfortable, she should tell me and we'd leave. We went, and she would laugh and joke with Simon, but when Maëlle spoke to her or asked her questions, food or drink choices, for example, she got very visibly uncomfortable and would kind of shut down or pretend not to hear her. Simon would glance between me and her a couple of times, but no one said anything, even Maëlle. I hadn't seen Cassie act like this in a long time, and resolved to talk to her about it when I got home. Well, that never happened, as we ended up staying the night and then going out to brunch the next day, where Cassie seemed perfectly fine with Maëlle. I thought it had blown over, and Cassie didn't say much about her from then on, so nothing sticks out in my head until Cassie announced a couple weeks later that she had a boyfriend, Chad. Cassie has always been bisexual but she's casually dated women exclusively since I met her, so this was a new development. I asked if she'd end up bringing him around, if she wanted to switch beds. Her aunt ended up giving us mattresses a couple years ago, and I'd taken the bigger one at Cassie's insistence. At first she said yes, and then changed her mind, saying that he lived alone and it was easier to go over to his house. Despite this, she never spent the night there, although she'd vanished to his house for hours on end. After she got her boyfriend, that I never met, almost 2 months later, is when shit really started getting weird. Cassie started getting oddly obsessed with things she'd never cared about before, like skincare and hair care. Her face started breaking out like crazy, and it really seemed to frustrate her. She was getting packages almost every other day, from Amazon or other places. I found a pamphlet on our side door table for laser eye surgery. She has glasses. She got a brand new phone, out of the blue, and started going to her school's gym and starving herself, and then binging the next day, and constantly told me that she was starting to lose weight. She was looking so good, her boobs were getting smaller. When I was folding our laundry one day, I found a shirt that was not mine and would not fit her. When I asked her about it, she quickly snatched it away, saying that she bought it for when she would be fit enough to wear it. We'd always watched TV shows together before, but she was spending an abnormal amount of time on her phone now. She mentioned setting her phone to French because she wanted to learn another language, and I told her to talk to Maëlle or another friend Stephanie, both are trilingual. She said she'd never ask Maëlle for help, and asked me not to talk about Maëlle around her. When I asked why, she said it seemed like Maëlle was mean to her, and Maëlle's behavior gave her anxiety. At this point, I started writing things down, as warning flags were going off, but I had no idea why, what they meant, or how to handle it. Which brings us to yesterday, when I got a text from Simon after I came back from work and Cassie had left me a text saying that she was at her boyfriend's, word for word off of my phone. Simon: hey, are we hanging tonight? Me: I had no plans to, why? Simon: just saw Cassie leaving our development, wondered if we forgot about plans we'd made. Maëlle is working overtime tonight, so I'm sorry if there was a miscommunication. Me: there wasn't, I had no plans to hang out and neither did Cassie. Simon: okay, nice, just making sure. See you Sunday. I thought about texting Cassie at this point, but decided against it. She came home that night with her hair dyed dark brown. I mentioned that Simon had texted me about seeing her leave the development, and she denied being there. I showed her the message, and she read it, before handing it back to me and saying that she didn't think there would be any board games on Sunday. When I asked why, she told me that Maëlle and Simon were considering calling off their engagement, because Simon wasn't happy with Maëlle anymore. When I asked her what made her think that, she got defensive. She said that Simon talked to her more than I realized, that they had a real connection, and that she was privy to all kinds of terrifying things about Maëlle that Simon had told her. She pulled out her phone and said that I should believe her, but if I didn't, she'd show me proof. For some reason, seeing her phone was the turning point for me, and it hit me all at once. Maëlle had dark brown hair. Maëlle had the exact same phone that Cassie suddenly got, and set it to one of Maëlle's primary languages that she speaks. Maëlle didn't wear glasses, but Maëlle did have Ray-Bans in the exact style that Cassie suddenly bought, pointlessly, because Cassie did not wear contacts. I'd never met Chad, but all of her descriptions of him sounded suspiciously like Simon: tall, tan, black wavy hair, really dark brown eyes. I asked to see her phone, and she basically flipped out, saying that I should trust her on principle, and that we're best friends. I wanted to ask her about everything I'd noticed, but I had no idea how to bring it up, so I sort of choked on my words. Cassie used the opportunity to yell at me again for not trusting her, started crying and said that she was going over to Chad's, slamming the door on her way out. After a couple minutes of just sort of standing there trying to process things, I started snooping. I know I shouldn't have, but that's water under the proverbial bridge at this point. I started in her bathroom, where I was faced with an unfamiliar array of French skincare products and really expensive shampoos and conditioners. The first drawer had all of her old stuff in it, Suave, drugstore skincare stuff, etc., and the second drawer had more of her old stuff with a paper list in it. I opened it and found a bunch of odd things written down, divided by lines. I realized after a moment that they were brands: Avan, Fido, Madewell, that sort of thing, divided by types, skincare, clothes, etc. Also written were seemingly random words like yoga, bangles and peacocks. Cassie worked part-time and did not have a lot of money to spare, so I was wondering where she got the money for this brand new range, and wondering if that's why her skin was so bad now. I opened the third drawer, and sort of just got a horrible sinking feeling. The third drawer had a bunch of things of Maëlle's in it. Lipsticks, hair accessories, a fucking pouch with her name embroidered on it that I didn't open, and a bunch of other stuff I didn't take stock of. After seeing this, I immediately texted Simon with, "Hey, is Maëlle missing anything from her bathroom?" Simon immediately called me. Yes, Maëlle had been missing things for a while now. I explained what I'd found, and Simon was just as confused and lost as I was. It ended with him asking me to just remove those things from her bathroom and put them in a bag, and to meet the next day to pick them up so I could explain to Maëlle. He said that I was still welcome in their house, but Cassie wasn't welcome anymore. He then said he'd call and tell her this and hung up. I gathered up all of Maëlle's things and moved them safely to my room, and when I came back out into the living room, I had 5 rambling texts from Cassie. In them, she blamed me for ruining her chances with Simon. She accused me of destroying our friendship by going through her things, saying she'd never forgive me, and that Maëlle was a bitch who was lying and trying to frame her to keep her and Simon apart. I immediately called Cassie, and it rang once before it went straight to voicemail. At this point, no holds were barred. Her laptop was on the arm of the couch, and I opened it. At first, I was going to go on her Facebook, but everything was right on the desktop in a folder labeled NNNN. Pictures of Simon from Instagram and Facebook, what little pictures Maëlle had posted on social media and screenshots of her Twitter updates, pictures of their house, the bathroom, the inside of Maëlle's dresser drawers, pictures peering through the windows of both of their cars, a picture of Maëlle's engagement ring. I immediately zipped the contents of the folder and emailed them to myself from Cassie's email account. I tried calling her again, and was shuttled to voicemail. I considered going into her room, but thought that might have also been crossing a line, so I just went into my room to take stock of what Cassie had stolen from Maëlle. She'd taken jewelry, a lot of stuff from the French pharmacies, tampons, calling cards, ointments, a lot of lipsticks, some skincare, mostly sunscreen, hair, accessories, some things definitely from her bedroom, a pair of small pink socks for example. So I'm just at a loss. I'm convinced there's no boyfriend of Cassie's, but I have no idea where she's been when she says she's at his house. I'm convinced that something is very wrong with Cassie for her to be so weirdly obsessed with Maëlle, but I have no idea what. Mael woke up with the flu this morning, so we are not meeting tonight, and Cassie hasn't been home since she left yesterday. I tried calling her twice today. Simon texted me briefly earlier in the day, but aside from that, I haven't spoken to anyone else about this. Update 1. I own my apartment and it has sliding doors in all of the rooms, hence my comment that I probably couldn't install a bedroom door lock quickly and easily. I wrote the original post about Thursday's events yesterday at around 5 or so. After I wrote the post, I was texting quite a few people, one of whom got a hold of Cassie's aunt, Marie, on my behalf. Marie called me at around 7 p.m. and we spoke for almost half an hour. Marie told me that Cassie had struggled with depression and a type of dissociative disorder when she was in elementary and middle school as a result of being in foster care for a year. I asked if Marie wanted me to alert the police, and Marie said that she would do it. As far as I know, the police in my area and Cassie's hometown have been told that she's missing and know of her current mental state. After I spoke with Marie, I took a long shower. I came out to find missed calls from both Simon and Mael, as well as one of our other friends, Shane. Shane is a gym buddy of mine and ex-military. Simon had called him to tell him what was going on, and I called Shane back first. He was going over to Simon and Mael's just to make sure everything was alright, and he wanted me to come with him and spend the night there. I agreed, and I called Mael back to make sure she was alright with that. She didn't answer but Simon did, and he was in agreement with us spending the night. I packed up a bag, Mael's things, and Cassie's laptop and drove over to Simon and Mael's. She had just gotten out of the shower as I arrived, and she looked like she was definitely recovering. We settled in the living room and I gave her the bag of what was missing, which Simon put upstairs without her looking at. Shane and Simon spent a good portion of the night playing Mario Kart with us while Mael alternated playing and chatting with her maid of honor Susie, who had come over after Simon had told her what was going on. Susie left at around 10, after Mael went to bed. At around midnight, Shane and I decided to go to bed as well. Simon went upstairs, and while Shane went to bed immediately, I opened Cassie's laptop. Aside from the pictures, there was not much else on there, and she hadn't logged in on Facebook from her browser in so long that she'd been logged out and I couldn't access anything regardless. I gave up and went to bed. At around 3 in the morning, I heard a car door slam shut outside. It immediately woke me up, and I opened my eyes in time to see lights flickering inside the window. I assumed this was someone's car lights flashing when the lock button is pressed, but I wasn't sure. I definitely heard footsteps on the wooden steps leading up to the front porch, and that's when I reached over and woke Shane up. Shane shot up and turned on a floor lamp, and I heard whomever was on the porch running back down the wooden steps. Shane unlocked the door and threw it open, and we both saw a car speed out of the driveway and take off down the road. I asked Shane what color the car was, and he said he couldn't see it in the dark. Simon and Mael's road is not well lit. We closed the door and debated waking Simon up and calling the police. Ultimately, we did not wake Simon up, but Shane went outside to call the local department and asked that they sent a couple cars up and down the road. Shane lied and said he'd seen Cassie's car in the driveway, and while they said there wasn't anything they could do, not surprising, they'd have the cruisers in the area start looking for her car and they'd send someone to patrol the condo area. After everyone woke up this morning, I made breakfast and we mostly hung around talking and playing the occasional Mario Kart. Mael said that she was going to attempt to file a report for the theft of her things, but as she had them back now, she wasn't sure if she could file a report based on hearsay. We discussed her options, what she could do, and I relayed what Marie had said about Cassie's mental state. Mael is more angry than freaked out, and seems to have her wits about her. When I told her about the pictures, she just laughed in disbelief and shook her head. She agreed that Cassie was mentally ill, and said that she hopes Cassie gets help, but she would never come over their home again and asked me to refrain from inviting her and Simon to any event that Cassie would be at. They both blocked her on social media and Mael deleted her Twitter. Simon's uncle is a police chief who works in another state, and they were getting ready to call him after I left. When I got home later on, the apartment didn't look like it had been visited by Cassie. I did a walkthrough and nothing seemed missing or out of place, so I then left around 2 to go to a prior engagement. At around 5, Marie called me again. She said that she hadn't heard anything from Cassie and our city's police hadn't seen her car. They were working on getting the police to track her credit or debit card transactions. Banks close early today in my country and won't reopen until Tuesday due to a holiday, so it's been hard to get a hold of anyone. She seemed very upset, and I promised her that I would keep her updated if I heard anything. Cassie's uncle will be driving into the city, about 4 hours away, if they don't hear anything from her or the police by tomorrow morning. Shane is staying over at my apartment tonight, and aside from that, there's not much else I can update with. I'll be changing the locks tomorrow with his help, and at Shane's insistence, we childproofed the drawers with knives and kitchen utensils in them to make them more difficult to open. Update 2. After Shane and I woke up on Sunday, I had an email from Marie saying that George would be getting into town at around 9 p.m., and he wanted to meet with me at my apartment. I texted Cassie again, and didn't get any sort of response. Games at Simon and Mael's were on as usual, and because of everything that happened, word spread fast despite our efforts. It seemed like a lot of people wanted to take the opportunity to see them. There were almost 20 people there, which is how I ended up in the basement playing board games. At around 7 p.m., a friend upstairs started calling for me. When I went back up, she pointed to my bag and told me that my phone had been ringing constantly for the past 5 minutes. I fished it out and I had 3 missed calls from a number that I didn't recognize but had our area code. I immediately stepped outside to call back. Without going into boring detail of the greetings, the number belonged to Elise. Elise was Cassie's long-standing FWB, and is one of a couple people that we know that do not hang out with people from the nerdy hipster group. Elise had called me because, of course, people had been talking. I can't remember the exact conversation, but it basically went like this. I basically felt like a bomb had dropped into my stomach. Cassie had come over at around 2 a.m. on Thursday night/Friday morning, as Elise and her boyfriend were getting home. All Cassie told Elise was that she'd had a nasty fight with me, and wanted to give it the weekend to cool off. Elise, knowing how Cassie can get with her anxiety, didn't press for details. They spent Friday just hanging out, and took off to the mountains all day on Saturday to go hiking. I asked where Elise and her boyfriend were on Friday night/Saturday morning, and she said that they'd basically smoked and went to bed around 1 a.m. Cassie didn't smoke with them, but she did leave at around midnight to grab donuts and other things from the store. Elise couldn't say if Cassie went to bed with them or not. At this point, I asked where Cassie was now. She and Elise's boyfriend were out picking up dinner, and she wanted to take the opportunity to call me about what she'd heard while they were out. I said that her uncle and aunt were insanely worried about her, and he was arriving in town at around 9 p.m. Elise asked why he was in town and why he was worried, and that's when I told her the full story. Right as I ended, however, Elise told me that her boyfriend and Cassie had just pulled up, and to continue over text. Over text, we agreed at first to meet at a restaurant at around 10, and then Elise drastically changed it to her house, giving me the address and telling me to come over as soon as possible. She said it would be easier to keep Cassie and then drag her out and possibly cause a scene in a restaurant. After this, I went back inside, but it was a bit hard to focus on the party. I decided to instead step back out and call George. After greeting him and formally introducing myself, I told him what I just heard. He said he'd been trying to text/call Cassie as well, and had gotten no response. He sounded extremely relieved and a bit choked up when I said that she was safe and staying with a friend. I told him that Elise had agreed to keep Cassie in and have us over so that we could talk to her, and he immediately agreed. I went back inside and found Shane and another close friend of Cassie's, and I pulled them aside to tell them everything. By the time I was done, it was almost 8 p.m. Shane and our friend both agreed that while they wanted to go, it was probably best if it was just me and Cassie's uncle, as they didn't want to embarrass or freak her out. I left the party 30 minutes early to get some coffee, because I was starting to get really nervous about confronting Cassie. At around 9:15-ish, I parked on the street a couple houses away from Elise's, and waited. I saw a car pull up on the other side of the street maybe 5 minutes later, and George got out and walked over to my car. After confirming it was each other, he reintroduced himself, and made a couple small jokes. I texted Elise to let her know that we were there, and he asked that he go in first. I was more than happy with that, and we rang the doorbell, and Elise opened the door. Elise's house turned out to be a foyer setup, which means that the front door didn't open up into the living room, like I'd hoped. We had to walk in and down a hallway to get to the living room. When George turned the corner, I sort of stayed behind. I heard all of the talking go silent, and then I heard Cassie start crying. George immediately walked into the living room, and when I finally turned the corner, he was sitting on the couch with his arm around her. Cassie eventually saw me, and just started crying harder. Elise turned the TV off and brought a chair out for me, and all three of us. Elise's BF was there, but was put in a very awkward position and just stayed quiet, firmly stated that we loved her and cared for her, but that she needed to schedule an appointment to see a psychiatrist. George took it a step further and insisted that she see someone now, and that he wanted to take her to the hospital downtown. Cassie didn't say anything for a long time. She mostly just nodded and cried and listened to us talk, and eventually verbally agreed with George. Elise said that she'd pack up Cassie's things and give them to me later, and that Cassie and George could leave now, if they wanted. Cassie turned to me to ask about her car, and I said that if it was okay with her, someone would drive it back to the apartment. She agreed, took the keys out of her purse, and started crying again as George walked her out into his car. I haven't seen Cassie or George since Sunday, although both George and Marie texted me to thank me. Cassie's living situation is still uncertain, but I hope I'll know more tomorrow, when she's released. Update 3. It's been about 2 weeks since my last update. Things have been moving quickly, and I've been trying to process everything that's happened while also maintaining some semblance of normalcy in my life. Cassie was released from the hospital after a 72-hour psychiatric hold. Her Aunt Marie called me the morning after she was discharged to let me know that Cassie would be staying with them for at least a month. The doctors diagnosed her with erotomania, a delusional disorder where she believed Simon was in love with her, along with some dissociative symptoms. They've put her on medication and set up intensive outpatient therapy. Marie asked if I would be willing to pack up some of Cassie's things for her Uncle George to pick up. I agreed, and Shane came over to help me. We carefully sorted through her belongings, making sure to respect her privacy while also checking for anything that might belong to Mael or Simon. We found several more items that weren't hers, a cologne that smelled like Simon's, a small framed photo of Maëlle and Simon that had gone missing from their living room, and a notebook filled with what looked like practice signatures of Cassie and Simon written over and over. The most disturbing discovery was a detailed calendar in her desk drawer with Simon's schedule meticulously documented: when he went to the gym, when he taught his evening classes, when he typically went grocery shopping. There were also notes about Maëlle's work schedule and when she would be away from home. I photographed everything before packing it all up, just in case it was needed later. George came by the next day to collect her things. He looked exhausted but thanked me for everything I'd done. He mentioned that Cassie had been more lucid since starting medication and had expressed deep shame about what happened. She apparently asked about me, wondering if I hated her. I told George the first didn't hate her, but I needed time to process everything. I met with Simon and Maëlle for coffee last weekend. They've installed security cameras around their condo and changed their routines. Maëlle seemed more relaxed than I expected, saying that while the situation was terrifying, she was glad it was discovered before things escalated further. Simon was quieter than usual, occasionally looking lost in thought. He admitted feeling guilty, wondering if he'd somehow encouraged Cassie's fixation without realizing it. I keep replaying every interaction we had, he said, staring into his coffee. Did I smile too much? Was I too friendly? Should I have noticed something was off? Maëlle reached over and squeezed his hand. This isn't on you. She's ill, and she needs help. That's all there is to it. I've been staying with Shane more often than at my apartment. The emptiness of Cassie's room is unsettling, and I keep finding little reminders of her: a hair tie under the couch, her favorite mug in the cabinet, the faint smell of her perfume in the bathroom. I've started looking for a new roommate, but I'm being extremely cautious this time. Yesterday, I received a letter from Cassie. It was handwritten on pale blue stationery, her usually messy handwriting carefully controlled. I don't know how to begin apologizing for what I've done, she wrote. The doctors say I lost touch with reality, but that feels like an excuse. I violated your trust and Maëlle's privacy. I became someone I don't recognize. I'm working hard in therapy to understand why this happened and to make sure it never happens again. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I'm truly sorry for everything. She ended by asking me not to respond, saying she needed to focus on her recovery without expectations. Her therapist apparently suggested maintaining distance from everyone involved in her delusion for now. Marie texted me this morning to say that Cassie is considering transferring to a university near their home to finish her degree. She's responding well to treatment but still has moments where she slips back into her delusions about Simon. The doctors believe a complete change of environment might help her recovery. As for me, I'm trying to move forward. I've thrown myself into work and my hobbies. The board game nights at Simon and Maëlle's continue, though there's still an undercurrent of tension when Cassie's name occasionally comes up. Maëlle has decided to postpone their wedding until next spring, feeling they both need time to recover from this experience. Sometimes I find myself wondering if I could have seen the signs earlier or done something differently. Shane reminds me that Cassie hid her obsession deliberately and that mental illness can be invisible until it isn't. I know he's right, but I still feel a lingering sense of responsibility. I've started seeing a therapist myself to work through everything. She's helping me understand that while I can feel compassion for Cassie and her struggles, I also need to acknowledge my own feelings of betrayal and fear. It's a delicate balance I'm still learning to navigate.